My perfect sister accused me of stealing her fiancé and banned me from her wedding. But when he canceled everything over how they treated me, my family blamed me for ruining her life and never expected my final revenge. I'm 24 years old. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, and I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago basically destroyed what little was left of my relationship with my family. The truth is, I was never close to them. I was always like the black sheep, you know, the weird one, the one who didn't fit in. And my sister Samantha, well, she was the complete opposite. The perfect daughter, the golden child who never did anything wrong. But what happened with her wedding? I mean, with the wedding that never happened? That was another level of crazy. And I still can't believe we got to that point. I guess I should start from the beginning so you understand what my life was really like before all this. I grew up feeling completely invisible in my own house. And when I say invisible, I don't mean they physically ignored me, but that everything I was, everything I felt, just didn't matter. For as long as I can remember, Samantha was the family star. 5 years, older than me, always perfect at everything, the best grades, tons of friends, captain of the volleyball team, that kind of stuff. And me? Well, I was the quiet kid who hid in her room and had panic attacks every time we had to go to a family gathering or when my parents invited people over. The worst part of it all is that my parents never, and I mean never, took my problems seriously. I remember I was like 12 years old when I started having stronger anxiety attacks, like I couldn't breathe. My heart was beating like it was going to jump out of my chest, and I felt like I was going to die right there. I told my mom once, after a particularly horrible episode at school, and she literally told me to stop being dramatic, that I just needed to go out more and make friends like Samantha. My dad was worse. He thought mental health was basically an excuse to be lazy, that people from his generation never needed therapy, and that I just needed to try harder. Can you believe it? As if anxiety was something you could just decide not to have. I spent my entire adolescence feeling like a complete misfit, and the only thing my parents did was constantly compare me to Samantha. Why couldn't I be more like her? Why didn't I have her grades? Why didn't I have friends? Why was I so antisocial? It never occurred to them that maybe, just maybe, there was something really wrong with me that needed professional attention. So I basically resigned myself to being the problem child. The family disappointment, and Samantha, well, she enjoyed every second of being the favorite. It wasn't like she was super cruel to me or anything, but there was definitely a kind of condescension in the way she treated me, like I was a charity project or something. Things started to change when I went to college. I managed to get into a school that was like 4 hours from home, and it was the best decision of my life, because I could finally breathe, you know, be away from all that constant pressure and comparisons. Plus, the university had free mental health services, and after a few months, I decided to go. Kind of in secret because I knew if my parents found out, they'd say I was wasting my time. And that's when I was finally diagnosed with social anxiety disorder, which is basically extreme anxiety in social situations, intense fear of others' judgment, all that stuff I'd been feeling since I was a kid, but that my family always ignored. I started therapy and eventually got prescribed medication, and honestly, it completely changed my life. It's not like I suddenly became a super extroverted person or anything, but at least I could function. I could go to classes without feeling like I was going to pass out. I could talk to classmates without having a panic attack afterwards. It was like I could finally live a little. And every time I went back home for the holidays, the difference between how I felt there and how I felt with my family was brutal. Because they stayed the same, they kept treating me like the weirdo, and I had less and less patience for that. After graduating, I got remote work and decided to stay in the city where I studied. I rented a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and I basically limited contact with my family to the bare minimum. I'd go home like 2 or 3 times a year, Christmas, my mom's birthday, that kind of thing, but no more. And honestly, I felt so much better that way. Much more at peace. The only ones in my family I maintained regular contact with were my grandparents, my mom's parents, because they were always more understanding with me. They never made me feel bad for being the way I am. Everything started getting really ugly at Christmas last year, like 10 months ago or so. Samantha brought her boyfriend Nicholas to the family dinner, and that was the first problem, although at the time I didn't realize it. Nicholas was 29 years old, just like Samantha. He worked in finance or something, seemed like a decent guy overall. During dinner, he was, I don't know, nice to me. like really nice in a way my family never is. He asked me about my work. He found graphic design interesting. He asked me questions about the projects I was working on, and I answered because, well, it was a normal conversation. You know what I mean? But Samantha got weird almost immediately. She started making passive-aggressive comments, like, "Oh, look how interesting that Nicholas is so interested in your work, Zoe. You don't usually talk this much." Stuff like that. I didn't pay attention to it at the time because I thought I was being paranoid, but now looking back, I should have seen it coming. My sister always needed to be the absolute center of attention, and probably the fact that her boyfriend was being nice to me bothered her more than it should have. After that Christmas, I basically didn't hear anything from my family for months, which was completely normal for me. I'd talk to my grandparents from time to time. They'd tell me family news, but with my parents and Samantha, I had almost no contact. Then, like in March, I think, or maybe it was April, I don't remember exactly, my grandparents called me super excited to tell me that Samantha and Nicholas had gotten engaged, and I was like, "Oh, okay, great, congratulations." But inside I was thinking, so nobody was going to tell me? I had to find out through my grandparents? But well, I was already used to being an afterthought for my family, so it didn't surprise me that much. What did surprise me was the call I got from Samantha, like 2 weeks after finding out about the engagement. She sounded super tense, super uncomfortable, and basically went straight to the point. She told me she was calling to tell me I wasn't invited to her wedding. Just like that. No beating around the bush. And when I asked her why, because obviously I was going to ask, she started with this completely delusional story about how Nicholas had feelings for me, that I was trying to steal him from her, that she couldn't have me at her wedding because I was going to ruin her special day with my presence. Honestly, I was speechless. I was literally silent for like 30 seconds processing what I had just heard. Finally, I told her she was crazy, that I had talked to Nicholas exactly once in my life, at that Christmas dinner, and that the conversation had been completely normal and innocent. But she didn't want to hear anything. She kept insisting that I knew perfectly well what I was doing, that I had always been jealous of her, all this completely made-up stuff. I told her it was fine. That if she didn't want me at her wedding, I wouldn't go. That I had no interest in being where I wasn't welcome anyway. And I hung up. What happened next? Well, I definitely didn't expect that. Like a week before the wedding, which was scheduled for early June, Nicholas canceled everything. The entire wedding, paid venue, invitations sent, everything. And when I say absolute chaos broke out, I'm understating it. Apparently, Nicholas told Samantha he couldn't marry someone who treated her own family like that the way she and my parents treated me seemed cruel to him, and he didn't want to be part of a family like that. I found out because my grandparents called me super worried, asking what had happened, because Samantha had told them her version of events, where basically I was the villain who had destroyed her relationship. And then my phone exploded. Samantha called me crying hysterically, begging me to please come to the rehearsal dinner that was still scheduled for that week, to tell everyone that I actually was invited to the wedding, that it had all been a misunderstanding. She wanted me to basically lie to save her relationship, so Nicholas would think she hadn't uninvited me from the wedding. I told her no, that I wasn't going to lie for her, that she had made the decision to exclude me and now she had to live with the consequences. I started screaming, saying I had always been selfish, that I was ruining her life on purpose. How could I be so cruel? I ended up hanging up on her again. But it didn't end there. Obviously. 2 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, I was working from home when I heard someone knocking on the door like crazy, like super aggressive knocking. I opened it and there they were. My mom, my dad, and Samantha. All three standing at my door with faces of absolute fury. My dad started yelling at me before I could even say hello, saying how dare I destroy my sister's life, that it was my responsibility to fix this, that I had to call Nicholas immediately and tell him it was all a misunderstanding. My mom was crying, saying I had always been the family problem, that I couldn't even let my sister have her special day without causing drama. And Samantha, she just looked at me with so much hatred, so much resentment. I told them I wasn't going to do anything, that I hadn't caused this, that they had created this situation with their constant favoritism and their refusal to treat me like a human being with feelings. My dad took a step toward me, pointing his finger at me, and told me that if I didn't fix this, if I didn't make Nicholas come back to Samantha, I could forget I had a family. I told him I'd already forgotten about that years ago, that they had never really been my family anyway. My mom started sobbing harder, saying how could I say something so horrible? But I was fed up. Completely fed up. After 24 years of being treated like garbage. I told them to leave my house, that they weren't going to manipulate me into cleaning up the mess they themselves had created. My dad was about to say something else when my neighbor next door opened his door, probably because of the yelling, and asked if everything was okay. That calmed them down a bit. I mean, they weren't going to make a complete scene in front of a stranger. They left. But not without first telling me this wasn't over, that I was going to regret this. That night I couldn't sleep. Honestly, the whole event had been super stressful, and although I knew I had done the right thing, there was something in me that felt guilty. You know, that little voice that tells you maybe you're the problem. Maybe you really are the terrible daughter they always told you were. But then I remembered all the times they had made me feel insignificant. All the times they ignored my pain. All the times they put Samantha above me without even thinking twice. And the guilt went away. The next day, I got a message from Nicholas. He apologized for all the drama, said he'd been thinking a lot about things and needed to know the truth about what had happened. So I told him everything. I explained that Samantha had specifically called me to uninvite me from the wedding, that she had accused me of trying to steal him when I had literally only had one polite conversation with him. I sent him screenshots of the messages, where she told me I wasn't welcome, because I had saved everything just in case. Nicholas was shocked. He told me Samantha had told him that I had decided not to go to the wedding because I didn't approve of it, that she had tried to convince me but I had refused. A whole elaborate lie. He thanked me for telling him the truth and told me he had a lot to think about. I wished him luck, honestly, because I imagined Samantha wasn't going to take well the fact that I had told him everything. And I was right. The next day, which I think was Saturday, Samantha showed up at my house again, this time alone. I opened the door, and before I could say anything, she slapped me. Hard. It left my face burning and probably a red mark that lasted hours. She started screaming that I had ruined her life, that I had poisoned things between her and Nicholas, that I was an envious bitch who could never stand to see her happy. I just stood there, touching my face, completely in shock. But then Nicholas appeared behind her. He had followed her, apparently worried about what she might do. He saw her slap me and just stood there for a second, processing what he had just witnessed. Then he told Samantha it was enough, that it was officially all over, that he couldn't be with someone capable of that violence and that level of manipulation. Samantha started crying, begging him to listen to her, that I had provoked it. But he was already walking back to his car. She shot me one last look full of pure hatred before running after him, but he left without looking back. And I was left there at my house door, my face still burning, thinking about how the hell my life had gotten to this point. I went inside, locked the door, and basically had a complete emotional breakdown. I cried for hours, not because I felt bad for Samantha, but because I was finally processing 24 years of being treated like I didn't matter, 24 years of emotional abuse and neglect. After that day, things calmed down for a while. I didn't hear anything from my family for weeks, which honestly was a relief. My grandparents would call me occasionally to see how I was, and I'd tell them I was fine, although I wasn't completely sure about that. I went back to therapy, told my therapist everything that had happened, and she helped me process the trauma of all this, and also from my childhood. I realized I had a lot of work to do in terms of healing from all that emotional abuse. But then, like a month after the slapping incident, another round of craziness started. It was a Sunday morning, like at 8 o'clock, and I heard a weird noise outside. I went to the window and saw that my car, which was parked on the street in front of my house, was completely covered in eggs. And it wasn't just a few eggs, like someone had easily used 3 or 4 full cartons. The car's paint was ruined, all sticky and smelly. And when I went out to see the damage better, I noticed they had also put eggs on my front door and windows. I didn't have to be a genius to know who it had been. I called Samantha immediately and told her that if she came near my house or touched my stuff again, I was going to call the police and file a formal complaint for vandalism and harassment. She didn't deny anything, just told me I deserved it, that I had ruined her life and now she was ruining mine. I told her that comparing some eggs to what she had lost through her own actions was ridiculous, and that this was her last warning. But apparently it wasn't enough, because a few days later I started getting calls and messages from unknown numbers. Hate messages, threats, people insulting me. Turns out Samantha had leaked my phone number in some group or forum, saying, "Who knows what lies about me?" I had to change my number after like a week of constant harassment, which was super annoying because I had to update my number with all my clients and work contacts. This time, I did call the police. I didn't press formal charges, but I did make an official report of the vandalism and harassment and told them my sister was behind it all. The officer who took my statement was very kind, told me to keep evidence of everything in case things escalated further. I sent Samantha a message with a screenshot of the police report, telling her next time it wasn't going to be just a report, it was going to be formal charges. And that's when she finally stopped. My parents called me after that, super angry because apparently Samantha told them I had threatened her with the police for nothing. I explained about the vandalism and harassment, but obviously they didn't believe me, or didn't care. My dad told me to stop being so dramatic, that it was just eggs, that I had destroyed my sister's future and now I was playing victim. I told him I didn't want to talk to any of them again, that for all I cared they could pretend I didn't exist, because basically that's what they had been doing my whole life anyway. My mom started crying, again, saying, how could I say that? That she loved me. But I couldn't deal with that anymore. I couldn't keep accepting that conditional love that only existed when I did what they wanted. After that, I blocked their numbers. All of them. My parents, Samantha, aunts and uncles and cousins who started sending me messages defending my sister. The only ones I didn't block were my grandparents, because they always supported me, always believed me. They were horrified by everything that had happened, by how my parents had handled the situation. My grandmother told me she had tried to talk to my mom, tell her they were being unfair to me, but that my mom didn't want to listen. It's been like 4 months since all that. Life has calmed down quite a bit. I don't get harassment calls anymore. Samantha hasn't shown up at my house again. My parents stopped trying to contact me after I blocked their numbers. I work. I go to therapy weekly. I occasionally go out with the few friends I have. I'm going to lie and say I'm completely fine, or that everything is perfect now, because it's not. There are days when I wonder if I did the right thing, if I should have handled things differently, if maybe I really am as bad as they say. But then I remember how I felt when I was still trying to maintain a relationship with them. That constant weight on my chest, that anxiety that never went away because I knew I was never going to be enough for them. I was never going to be Samantha. And I realized that even though it hurts, even though it's hard to accept that your own family rejected you, being away from them is the best thing I could have done for myself and my mental health. My grandparents visited me last week. They brought homemade food. We sat in my small apartment and talked for hours. They told me Samantha is dating someone new, that my parents are trying to act like nothing happened, like I simply decided to distance myself for no reason. My grandmother asked me if I would ever consider forgiving them, having contact again. I told her I honestly didn't know, that maybe someday, but that right now I needed to focus on myself, on healing from all this. My grandfather took my hand and told me something that stuck with me. He said that sometimes the family you choose, the family you build yourself, is more real than blood family. That I deserve to be surrounded by people who valued me for who I am, not for who they wanted me to be. And he's right, I guess. I'm learning to build that family for myself, slowly, with friends who really care, with my therapist who helps me heal, with my grandparents who have always been there. I don't know what will happen in the future with my family. I don't know if Samantha will ever apologize, or if my parents will realize the damage they did to me during my whole life. Honestly, I don't expect anything from them anymore. I've accepted that I'm probably never going to have the family I always wanted, that family that supports you unconditionally, that celebrates your achievements even if they're small, that holds you when you're falling. But I'm learning that it's okay, that not having that family doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. Last week, I managed to finish a big project for a client, something I'd been working on for months. It was a complete redesign of a small business's visual identity, logo, website, marketing materials, everything. When the client saw the final result, he was so excited he almost cried. He told me I had captured exactly what he had imagined, that my work was going to help his business grow. And in that moment, sitting at my desk in my small apartment, I realized I didn't need my family's validation to know I'm worth something, that I'm capable, that I deserve respect. I still have difficult days when the anxiety is strong or when I feel lonely. But I also have good days when I wake up and feel at peace with my decisions, days when I can breathe without that constant weight on my chest. And that's enough for now, I guess. I'm building a life for myself. A life where I don't have to apologize for existing, where I can be me without fear of constant judgment. It's not perfect, but it's mine. And that's the only thing that really matters.